It was 11:15 at night. The storm had finally passed, but the air was still damp and heavy. Clouds drifted silently above the city skyline, and the cold breeze crept between the buildings like something unseen. One of those buildings, Garrison Heights, stood tall and silent, hiding decades of secrets within its aging structure. On the 10th floor, Michael, a freelance graphic designer, had just finished a long night of work. Living alone, isolated from friends and family, he had grown used to the silence, but tonight, that silence felt heavier, as if it were pressing down on him. Stretching his back and rubbing his tired eyes, Michael grabbed his phone and headed toward the elevator. Normally, he would take the stairs. The elevator was known to be faulty, unreliable, and frankly, creepy. Some residents whispered that it would stop randomly on unknown floors, or that it had once taken someone somewhere they never returned from. Michael chuckled to himself. Urban legend crap, he muttered, but tonight, whether out of fatigue, boredom, or some unspoken curiosity, he pressed the elevator button. The elevator door creaked open with a groaning sound. The inside was dimly lit, flickering with a yellowish glow. Rust stained the handrails, and the panel of floor buttons looked ancient. Every button had a number, except one, which had a black circle instead. No number. No label, just a black void. Michael hesitated. Then pressed it. The elevator shuddered lightly, then began to descend, but something was wrong. No sound. No motion. The lights didn't flicker. It felt like the entire world had paused. Then the elevator stopped, the door slid open. Michael found himself staring into a corridor that didn't belong in Garrison Heights. It didn't belong anywhere he'd ever seen. Michael cautiously leaned forward, peering into the hallway before him. A long, dim corridor stretched ahead, cloaked in a strange mist that hovered just above the ground. The walls were lined with crooked picture frames. As he stepped closer, he noticed something chilling. Each frame held a distorted photograph, and in every single one was his own face, but the faces weren't the same. In some, he was smiling eerily. In others, he looked terrified, angry, or lifeless. Michael backed up instinctively, but the elevator door behind him slid shut on its own. A low hum vibrated through the floor. The air smelled of damp wood and old paper. He turned toward the corridor again, his footsteps muffled by a dusty, threadbare carpet. As he passed each picture, the images seemed to change slightly, subtle movements of the eyes, the background shifting like old memories trying to come alive. Then he reached one frame and stopped. It showed him as a child, no more than 10 years old, sitting under a tree with a broken toy in his hands, tears on his cheeks. Behind him stood a dark, shadowy figure, its face completely obscured, but its glowing eyes unmistakable. Michael swallowed hard and touched the frame. It trembled. Suddenly, the air grew colder. Whispers drifted from the walls, as though the building itself was breathing around him. Turn back. Too late. You left us. Now we'll never leave you. At the end of the hallway, a door appeared. Heavy. Wooden. Covered in black nails. Carved across the front were the words, Level -1. Michael's hand shook as he reached for the handle. The door creaked open slowly, a scream echoed from deep inside, and beyond it, only darkness. He stepped forward, and the door slammed shut behind him. The darkness swallowed him whole. Michael stood frozen for several seconds, unsure if his eyes were open or closed. The silence was deafening, thick like a fog pressing into his ears. Then, slowly, a cold blue light bloomed from above, dim, flickering, and pulsing like a dying heartbeat. In the center of the room stood a tall mirror, almost reaching the ceiling. Unlike the frames in the hallway, this mirror wasn't cracked or distorted. It was perfectly clear. Too clear. Michael stepped closer, his reflection slowly coming into focus. At first, it looked like him. But then, it didn't. The man in the mirror stared back at him with sunken red eyes, tangled hair, and a twisted scar running across his jawline. His smile was warped, unnatural, the kind of smile that had never felt happiness. It was the version of himself he'd buried deep inside and refused to acknowledge. And then the reflection moved. But Michael hadn't. The image in the mirror tilted its head and spoke in a voice that was almost his, but laced with something ancient and rotten. You remember me, don't you? Michael stepped back, his breath catching in his throat, the mirror began to shimmer. Images flooded across its surface, scenes from his past, a younger Michael slamming a door in someone's face, an elderly man sitting alone on a hospital bed, staring at the door that never opened, a woman crying on the sidewalk. As Michael walked away without turning back, choices. Regrets. The moments he never wanted to face, he turned away from the mirror, but the room twisted. The walls stretched and swirled like liquid. Whispers echoed from the corners, "You can't run anymore. You forgot us. You erased us." Then, without warning, the back wall of the room cracked open, revealing another elevator, the same one he had first stepped into, now glowing faintly with blue light. The doors were open, waiting. Michael stumbled into it, panting. As soon as he entered, the door shut behind him. On the control panel, a new button had lit up, -2, the elevator began to descend. Michael pressed his back to the cold steel wall, trying to calm his pulse, but one thought echoed louder than anything: this elevator isn't just going down a building, it's going down into me. The elevator came to a jolting stop. Michael braced himself. Ding, the doors creaked open. This time, the floor looked painfully familiar, an old-school hallway, yellowed lockers on both sides, flickering fluorescent lights above. He stepped out slowly. The walls were covered in peeling posters, faded student council ads, ancient flyers, warnings about bullying. But the entire place was eerily quiet, no voices, no laughter, just the faint buzz of one dying light overhead. Michael walked forward. As he passed the lockers, some of them slowly creaked open by themselves, revealing nothing but dark, empty voids, like holes into another world. He stopped in front of a classroom door marked Room 13. It was already ajar. He pushed it open. The classroom inside was arranged as if students had just left, but everything was old, dusty, and covered in cobwebs. Faded desks. A chalkboard with ghostly writing that read, "We don't forget." Why did you? At the far end of the room, in the last row, sat a single figure. Michael's heart dropped. It was Daniel, his classmate from junior high. Quiet, always nervous, always picked on. And Michael had been one of them. Not the loudest bully, but the silent contributor, the one who laughed when others mocked Daniel, who stayed quiet when he saw it happen. Daniel looked up. His face was pale, unmoving. His eyes hollow. He whispered. "You pretended you didn't see me. But I saw you." Michael stepped back, shaken. "I didn't mean, you didn't stop them," Daniel said, standing up now, his voice growing stronger. "And then you forgot me. Like I never existed." The classroom trembled. The chalkboard cracked. The windows shattered inward, though no wind blew. Whispers filled the room, dozens of voices, from every shadow of the class, echoing one after another. "You forgot me, you laughed with them, you let me fall." The floor beneath Michael cracked. He stumbled backward out of the classroom, running down the hall, chased by the voices of guilt, of regret, of forgotten souls. The elevator stood waiting at the end of the hallway. Michael dove inside just as the floor behind him collapsed into darkness. Slam. The doors shut. His breath was ragged. Sweat ran down his temple. On the panel, a new light came on, -3, and on the mirror-like steel of the elevator wall, something was now faintly etched. "You are not the man you pretend to be." The elevator began to descend again. The descent slowed. Michael gripped the handrail, dreading the next stop. The elevator halted with a heavy thud, and the door opened into silence. A wide, dimly lit chamber stretched out before him. Cold air hit his face. This place felt ancient. Stone walls, dust dancing in the air, candles flickering on iron sconces, casting long, restless shadows. At the far end stood a circular wall, completely covered in photographs, hundreds, maybe thousands. He stepped inside slowly. The candlelight seemed to grow warmer the deeper he went. The photos were all black and white, worn around the edges, stained with time. Then Michael noticed something chilling. All the faces were blurred. Except his. Every single photo had his face in it. Different clothes, different places, different times, smiling, crying, screaming, dying. It didn't make sense. He moved closer. In one photo, he was standing beside a woman crying on a hospital bed. In another, he was on a street corner, ignoring a homeless man's outstretched hand. One picture made his knees weaken. It was him, standing over a gravestone, smiling, his breath caught in his throat. He'd never seen that gravestone before. He didn't know whose it was, but the smile was real. Suddenly, the wall trembled. The photos began to fall one by one, fluttering to the floor like dying leaves. From the shadows, a slow dragging sound emerged. Something was crawling. Something unseen. Michael spun around, a voice rasped from the darkness, every choice. Every face. You wear them all. He backed up. A figure emerged, completely faceless, like a human-shaped blur. It wore a suit identical to his. It moved like him, it reached out its hand. You left pieces of yourself in every person you walked away from. And now, they walk with you. Michael turned and sprinted. The stone floor cracked with every step. The elevator door stood open again, flickering like a dying flame. He leapt inside. The door shut instantly. Silence returned. He sank to the floor, breathing hard. On the elevator panel, the next button glowed red, -4, but something new had appeared on the ceiling. Redemption costs more than regret. And then the lights dimmed again. The descent continued. The elevator's hum deepened as it descended toward level -4. Michael felt it in his bones now. This wasn't just some haunted building, this was his trial, a descent into his own conscience, where each level peeled back another mask he wore. Ding! The doors opened, a foul, moldy odor seeped into the elevator. Michael stepped into a flooded basement, water up to his ankles, ice-cold and black. Broken furniture floated past, and shattered light bulbs sparked from the ceiling like dying stars. The air buzzed with low, guttural whispers that he couldn't understand. The room was narrow, almost like a tunnel, and dim lights flickered along the walls as he moved forward. The farther he went, the deeper the water became. By the time it reached his knees, he began to shiver, not just from the cold, but from the eyes he saw beneath the surface. Yes, eyes, dozens of them. Pale, unmoving, and watching him from under the water. As if waiting. As if judging. Suddenly, a voice echoed from behind him, soft, feminine, and devastatingly familiar. You said you'd never leave me. He froze. Slowly, he turned. Behind him stood Lena, the woman he had once promised everything to. And walked away from when she needed him most. She was beautiful once. Now, her face was pale, lips blue, eyes filled with tears. She wasn't angry, she was broken. I waited. I waited in hospitals. I waited on your silence. I waited when you walked out. And I never stopped. Michael stepped back. His voice cracked. I couldn't. I didn't know how to face you. Lena tilted her head. Her eyes grew colder. Then why did you say you'd stay? The water surged upward without warning, nearly swallowing him whole. Lena vanished beneath it. Michael screamed her name, but there was no answer. Just bubbles. Just darkness. He stumbled toward the elevator, which now flickered violently at the tunnel's end, water rising up to his chest. The whispers became louder, chanting his name, accusing him. He threw himself into the elevator just as the water rushed in behind him. Slam. The doors shut. He fell to the floor, soaked, shivering. The elevator lights dimmed again. And the next button lit up, -5, but something else had changed. Now, his reflection on the steel wall wasn't matching his movements anymore. It just stood there, staring at him, smiling. As the elevator descended toward level -5, Michael sat hunched in the corner, soaked and trembling. His reflection on the elevator wall continued to smile, a smile that didn't belong to him anymore. It was the smile of a man losing his grip on reality. Or surrendering to it. Ding! The door opened, slowly, with a long metallic groan. This time, Michael stepped out into a room completely devoid of time. There were no windows, no clocks, and no doors, only 4 walls painted a lifeless gray, and a single wooden chair in the center. On the floor in front of the chair lay a pile of wristwatches, all broken, their hands twitching erratically. Some ticked backwards. Others had stopped at different times. Michael moved closer, drawn to the chair like a moth to flame. As he approached, a voice, familiar, cold, and emotionless, echoed from the walls. "How long have you wasted pretending to be someone you're not?" He looked down. The chair now had a mirror nailed to the seat, angled up toward him. In the mirror, he didn't see himself, he saw everyone else. Every person he had disappointed. Every opportunity he had ignored. Every time he had told himself, "I'll fix it tomorrow." The voice returned, quieter now. "You ran out of tomorrows, Michael. This is what you bought with your yesterdays." Suddenly, the room darkened. The watches on the floor began to spin violently, ticking louder and louder, tick 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 tick, until the sound was like a roar in his ears. Michael dropped to his knees, covering his ears. Then, silence. He opened his eyes. All the watches were gone, only the chair remained, and on its seat, the words had been etched with something sharp: "Face yourself. Or rot with us." The wall across the room cracked open. The elevator was waiting. Michael stood slowly, his body heavy, his chest aching. As he stepped back into the elevator, the doors closed like eyelids shutting over a restless dream. The button for level -6 lit up. But this time, so did something new. A countdown timer appeared beside it, starting at 10 o'clock. Ticking down, the elevator began its next descent. The countdown ticked on. 9:37. 9:36. 9:35. Michael watched the red digits blink ominously beside the button for level -6. This was different. There had never been a timer before. Now time wasn't just passing, it was running out. The elevator slowed. Ding. The doors opened into a room that looked like an ancient library, only it wasn't filled with books. It was filled with files. Thousands of them. Filing cabinets stretched endlessly in every direction, arranged like a maze. The air was thick with the scent of paper, ink, and something older. Something metallic. Michael stepped forward cautiously, the doors shutting behind him. The lights in the archive flickered, then stabilized. A robotic voice echoed from hidden speakers. "This level contains your life. Unfiltered. Every lie. Every omission. Every truth you feared." Michael's footsteps echoed on the cold concrete floor as he wandered deeper into the maze. Cabinets towered above him, labeled with categories like guilt, unspoken, betrayals, passive, promises, broken, emotions, fate. He stopped at one drawer labeled Dad. Hand trembling, he pulled it open. Inside were photos of Michael as a teenager, angry, silent, avoiding eye contact. At the back of the drawer was a small audio recorder. He pressed play. His father's voice crackled through the static. "I tried, Michael. I didn't know how to love right. But I tried." Michael froze. That voice. That tone. He had blocked it from his memory. A shadow moved behind the cabinets. Michael turned, but nothing was there. Then another drawer flung open on its own. This one labeled Love, Manipulated. Inside was a letter, one he had never sent, meant for Lena, the woman he had left behind. "I wish I could be better for you. But I'm afraid if you saw who I really am, you'd leave. So I'm leaving first." The paper caught fire in his hands, turning to ash. The archive began to rumble, drawers slamming shut and flying open. Whispers swirled in the air. "Why didn't you say it? You knew what she needed. You let silence destroy everything." Michael ran. The cabinets were shifting, forming new paths, trapping him. He turned corner after corner until, finally, he saw it, the elevator, standing where it hadn't been seconds ago, waiting. He dove in, slam, the doors shut. The lights inside flickered, then dimmed. The countdown now read 6:02. 6:01. He looked up at the panel. Level -7 was glowing red, and now, above all else, he could hear a new sound. Something was breathing inside the elevator, but it wasn't him. The air inside the elevator had changed. It was no longer cold, but thick, heavy like fog, warm like breath. Michael stood still, back against the wall, eyes darting toward the corners. The breathing was deep, wet, rhythmic. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. Tick, tick, tick. The countdown on the panel read 4:58. 4:57. Suddenly, the elevator lights flickered violently, then shut off completely. darkness, absolute. Michael reached for the panel, his fingers fumbling in the dark, and then he felt it, a presence, not in front of him. Not behind him, inside the elevator. Standing beside him. Breathing, a guttural whisper scraped against his ear. You kept me here, Michael. You made me from your silence. He jumped away, heart pounding. The lights flashed back on for just a second, and in that instant, he saw it, a figure. 7 feet tall. Skin like cracked glass. No eyes. No mouth. Just a gaping black hole where a face should be. Then the lights went out again, the elevator dropped an inch, then stopped, and the thing laughed. It didn't sound angry. It sounded familiar. Michael whispered, trembling, "What are you?" The answer came slowly, chillingly clear. I'm everything you buried, every scream you ignored, every apology you never gave. I am you, without the mask. The lights flicked on again, and the figure lunged. Michael screamed, slam. The elevator jerked violently and dropped to the next level. Ding, the doors opened, and the figure was gone. Michael stumbled out onto the next floor, gasping, drenched in sweat. The hallway before him was lined with mirrors, hundreds of them, all showing different versions of himself, laughing, crying, rotting, screaming, smiling with dead eyes, and every one of them whispered the same word in unison, liar. Behind him, the elevator doors closed slowly, and the countdown continued, 3:21. 3:20. Michael staggered through the mirror-lined hallway, each step echoing with the whispers of his own reflection, liar. Coward. Selfish. He tried to ignore them, but the mirrors followed, rotating, moving, closing in. In each reflection, he was different, 1,000 versions of guilt, 1,000 masks. He finally reached the end of the hall, where a single iron door stood. Carved into its surface were words etched in crimson, "Speak, or be silenced forever." Michael hesitated, then pushed the door open. Inside was a room that resembled a church confessional, but twisted, pews carved from bone, chandeliers made of rusted wire, stained glass windows that showed his own worst memories instead of saints. At the far end of the room was a wooden chair and an old tape recorder sitting on a pedestal, already blinking red, recording. A voice, neither male nor female, filled the room. This is your last chance to confess. Not to us. To yourself. Michael stepped forward. His hands shook. He sat in the chair, stared into the recorder's blinking light, and for a long moment said nothing. Then he whispered, I am not a good man. I ran. I always ran, from responsibility. From pain. From love. I left people when they needed me. I wore kindness like a costume, and I hated myself for how easy it was to fake it. His voice cracked. I wanted to be better. But it was easier to pretend I already was. So I lied. Over and over. Until I couldn't even hear the truth anymore. Silence. The recorder stopped blinking, the lights dimmed, a door opened at the side of the confessional, revealing the elevator again, now darker than ever. Its walls were scorched. Its buttons melted, and the countdown read, 1:59. 1:58. Michael stepped in slowly. The doors closed behind him, without a sound, but now, there were no more buttons. No lights, just one single word carved into the metal wall, end. And beneath it, in Michael's own voice, warped, ghostly, came a whisper, you still haven't met what waits at the bottom. The elevator was no longer moving. Michael stood in the flickering dark, breathing in air that felt like smoke and static. The countdown on the wall had reached 0:59. 0:58, 0:57, a deep groan echoed through the metal, as if the elevator cables above were straining to hold something far heavier than a man. Then, shudder, the elevator dropped again, but this time, not to a level marked with a number. The panel displayed one word, truth. The elevator came to a crashing halt. When the doors opened, Michael stepped into a massive circular chamber, unlike anything he'd seen before. The walls were covered in screens, and every screen displayed a version of his life, not as he remembered it, but as it really happened, moments he had rewritten in his mind, words he thought he never said, faces he tried to forget. In the center of the chamber was a massive mirror. And in that mirror stood the faceless version of himself from earlier, the one that had breathed beside him in the elevator, but now, it was fully formed, tall, pale, featureless, and wearing his skin. It stepped toward him and spoke in his voice, "I'm not your fear. I'm your truth. You didn't come here to escape, you came to finally admit who you really are." Michael shook his head. "I've confessed. I've faced it all." The reflection snarled. "No. You've only scratched the surface. What about the part of you that enjoyed the silence? The power in disappearing? The thrill of being unreachable?" The screens flashed faster, images of Michael turning his phone off when people needed him. Ignoring emails. Canceling hospital visits. Walking away from love not because he was broken, but because he liked control. He fell to his knees. The voice hissed, "You were never the victim. You were the architect of your own ruin." Suddenly, the floor cracked. The chamber trembled, the mirror shattered, and behind it stood a dark elevator shaft, glowing with red light at the bottom. A final descent. Michael stepped toward it. He could jump or turn back, but he knew now, this wasn't about death or survival, it was about choice. He whispered, "Then I choose to end it. Not by running, but by accepting." He stepped off the edge. Michael gasped awake. He was lying in the real elevator, in Garrison Heights, drenched in sweat, the lights above humming steadily. The panel showed, G, ground floor. The doors slid open. The morning sun was rising outside, no shadows. No whispers. He stepped out into the world. Different, lighter, not redeemed, but honest, and as he walked out of the building for the first time in weeks, a new message appeared on the elevator wall behind him, one he would never see.